You're listening to Smart Moves with your hosts, Ann Riley Caldwell and Matt Wilson.
Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the Smart Moves podcast, where we help you make smart and strategic choices, especially when it comes to buying and selling real estate, finance, and sometimes some life advice creeps in there too. I'm Ann Riley Caldwell, not your ordinary agent here in Middle Tennessee. And I'm here with my podcast co-host, Matt Wilson, lender extraordinaire, who can tell you a little bit about himself real quick.
What's up, everybody? I'm a mortgage guy. I've been doing this for far longer than I thought I would. And I make mortgages not suck because let's face it, you want the house from Ann Riley. You don't want the mortgage. This is just a necessary evil part of the process, right?
That's right. But he makes it as painless as possible. So anyway, so we're here to try to help make things painless for you as much as possible as you walk through that whole process of real estate. Matt and I were just talking like we always do before we hit record on the podcast, and we realized we should have just recorded as talking. So we're going to do something different today. We're just going to have a free-for-all, and we're just going to kind of throw out some scenarios that we've seen lately, questions that we see over and over again, and perhaps even better ways to help you deal with them if you find yourself in some of those circumstances, because that's what we're here for. So anyway, I'll let Matt throw something out there because he had some really good ones earlier. Let's see if we can remember them.
Ha! All right. So you're a real estate agent, obviously, or we wouldn't be doing this podcast. So
I made him do it.
from your perspective, from your perspective, like let's say that you have a buyer, they find the perfect house. And then you get the home inspection and find out that Mr. Perfect has got a little bit of hair, under the surface there. So, what are the options that people have whenever they've got issues with the property that maybe they don't want it that way?
Yeah, so that comes up a lot because no house is perfect. One time and only one time, I had someone buy a townhome and they only found two really minor things wrong with it. And I would have to say that is almost a miracle because nothing is built perfectly. And even, I would say, even new construction, because most people think new construction is going to be perfect. There's a lot of really bad new construction out there. So just trust me on that one. So one thing that I always highly recommend, not all agents do, is that you truly should have at least at a minimum a general home inspection. Some people, tell their clients it's okay to waive it. There are times when we had multiple offers with, 10 plus offers on a house that waiving a home inspection was a strategic choice. That some buyers chose to go down that path, but I would say it's very rare circumstances that you should do that. In the purchase and sale agreement, you do have a couple options though. You can do a home inspection with the potential intent and not waiving your rights to do a repair proposal, which means there will be certain things that you may find that you want to put on a form that we call a proposal. And if I'm the buyer's agent in this instance, I'm sending it to the listing agent for the sellers to review it and talk about whether or not they're going to fix some or all of those things. Or there are instances where instead of fixing certain things, they just offer a credit towards closing costs or reduce the purchase price, which I can ask Matt some follow-up questions on that, because they don't want to have a repairman come in and fix things. Some people don't have anybody to call. They're trying to hurry up and get out of their house. We've only got a week before closing and they don't have time to get it done. So there's various things there. Depending upon what it is, purely cosmetic things we're not supposed to ask for. Occasionally we might ask for them, but that doesn't mean the seller's going to say yes to them. The seller technically doesn't really have to do much of anything if they don't want to, unless it's a true health and safety standard, or it's going to keep the loan from being closed. So remind me, Matt, I can also circle back on that one too. But basically we're negotiating, just like we negotiated up front for the price, the closing costs, and different things. So the options typically are everybody agrees to move forward and not have anything done. Agree to move forward with the seller actually taking care of certain repairs that everybody agreed to, or they take care of some, they hire outside people to take care of others, or it could shut down the whole transaction and we could end up going out of contract because you're supposed to negotiate in good faith, which is also a whole thing sometimes, and try to get to a resolution. But if you truly can't do that, then, the parties can agree to walk away and buyers get their earnest money back, as long as you do it within that contract window, because we also negotiate a certain period of time to get all inspections done, as well as what we call a resolution period, which is the time for that negotiation about repairs to go back and forth. There's also a checkbox on the PSA where you can have the right as a buyer's agent to do a home inspection, but you're going to waive asking for the seller to repair anything. So you're either going to take it as is, meaning not asking for any repairs or any type of credit, or you're just going to walk away. You're not going to negotiate. And then there's also the box where you just waive walking away at all and or not doing a home inspection. But I mean, that's where the art of negotiation and having an agent. I mean, I have a great home inspector that a lot of my clients use. I have 2 or 3 that, if my clients need them, that they can choose from. But I spend lots of time. I'm not supposed to get too heavy in the weeds when it comes to repairs and what they mean and what they cost. So I really encourage my clients to talk to the home inspector. But they have to tell me certain things so that I know what to write on the repair proposal and what it is that we're talking about and how much they really want me to push on certain items. So I have to understand it to some degree. So I learn a lot in the process just so I can understand what my clients are asking for, the right way to word what it is, because I try to be as specific as possible. Because if you don't say that a seller has to get a licensed, plumber or electrician, they'll just have Uncle Joe come over and slap something together and say that they did it. So there's nuances there that I try to do that I don't see come back on the other side when I'm representing a seller a lot of times. There are a lot of repair amendments that get signed, which I use them to the advantage of my client sometimes, that they're not very specific about how something gets fixed or who fixes it or whatever. Still making sure it gets done, but maybe it could have been done even better. I don't know. I just know that I try to be very specific in any repair amendments that get put together for the people that I'm representing when it's to their advantage, especially when they are a buyer. So a couple of things I hit on there that also affect the making an amendment to the purchase and sale agreement and affects the lending piece of it. One of the things I mentioned that Matt can talk about is sometimes we go back and we actually get a credit towards closing costs or towards down payment assistance, or we reduce the purchase price. So Matt can kind of talk about when he sees those, what that actually means and what that does and what parameters that we have to stay in if somebody's already contributing closing costs to the deal.
Yeah. So, the first thing is, like, as a lender, not to sound insensitive, but we don't really care what repairs have to be done as long as it ain't something the appraiser is going to call out. And for the appraiser to call it out, it's going to be a big deal for the most part. Holes in windows or roofs or something crazy like that most of the time. If it's a government loan, they'll get a little touchy about handrails and peeling paint on occasion. But the biggest things on our end where it can impact you from a mortgage standpoint are, number one, like if you've already got tight cash to close and the seller's not in a position to actually fix the problem for you and they're willing to, say, hey, take $5,000. Most of the time, if your cash to close is tight, then having that done in a seller credit towards your closing cost is going to be the most effective use of that, because that actually keeps literally $5,000 in your pocket so that you can use that money to pay somebody to fix it or to buy parts to fix it yourself when you move into the house. Which also kind of leads me to kind of a tangent that's personal experience. This isn't me giving you real estate advice because I'm not licensed to do that. She is. But when I sold a house not long ago, one of the things that I insisted on was just going ahead and doing a credit as opposed to me fixing a couple of the problems that were there that were found in the home inspection. Because, me as the homeowner, now I've been notified these problems exist. I'd either have to fix them or notify the next person that they exist. But I wanted them to choose the scope of the work. I didn't want to do it and then be accused after the fact of half doing it or getting Uncle Bob to come fix it or whatever like that. The easiest thing was, hey, we both found some quotes that we can kind of come to agreement on. This is probably roughly what it'll cost. Take the money. You fix it yourself when we're done. Likewise, the one of the issues that I had on my house was like a foundational thing. Listen, the house had been standing for 75 years and not fallen down yet, so I'm sure it wasn't going to after they bought it. But to make them feel warm and fuzzy, like I agreed to give some concessions for that. But the people that said that they were going to do the work warned me, like, if we do this, it's possible it could screw up your floors inside the house a little bit here because you got tile floors. We're changing how the floors are laid out. They've been laid and working on a saggy floor joist just a little bit here. Well, I don't want it to be me that owns the house still if those tiles decide to pop up, right? So anyway, complete side note, personal experience thing that has nothing to do with what you just asked me, but kind of. The biggest thing on my end is if we do get an amendment to the contract to give more seller credit or lower the purchase price or whatever, I don't want to know that it has anything to do with repairs. The reason is if I've seen some agents in the past send me something that'll be like, in lieu of repairs, seller to reduce purchase price or sell price by $10,000. If I were to turn that into an underwriter, the underwriter is going to go, hey, Matt, what repairs is this in lieu of? And it's going to open up an entire can of worms that nobody wants to be involved with, including the underwriter. The thing is, we can't document things that way that open up the opportunity for an underwriter to ask more questions. We need to just have a closed loop where it's like, oh, look at that. They decided to be nice and give them $10,000 off the purchase price, give them $10,000 more in seller credits. Now, one thing to be mindful of whenever you do already have seller credits in play, let's say that you've already got them paying your closing costs. Well, they can pay potentially more than you actually have in closing costs. And depending on the loan type, you may not actually be able to take full credit of that benefit. And in that situation, it may be best to just knock it off the purchase price. For example, FHA loans, they've got a 6% maximum seller credit allowance. If you're already at 4 or 5%, and once you get done with the repairs, you're going to be over that. You're not going to actually get to keep that money. So the seller kind of wins in that situation. If you're conventional with less than 10% down, you're capped at 3%. That's usually where we run into the most trouble at with this sort of thing. But those are numbers that you got to kind of keep in the back of your head as you're negotiating things, and definitely talk to your lender. Or if you don't have a lender that's talking to you about these things, call us. This is why we're here. That way you can talk through whether or not you can actually get benefit from what it is you think you're about to benefit from, because nothing would be worse than to get into the closing table and finding out, well, where you thought you were having $15,000 in seller credit, you can use 10 of it. That would suck.
Yeah, so that's why as soon as we get into negotiations and there's any thought about taking a seller credit, the first thing I do is call Matt and say, hey, can you confirm how much room do we have left for them to take a seller credit? And then that way, and also encourage my buyers to talk to Matt too, so they hear it directly from him, because sometimes we do a combination. We might lower the purchase price $3,000 and take $2,000 in a seller credit, because that's going to max out that closing cost contribution. So this is why you really need agents who are talking to your lender also. I mean, there are some agents who tell me I never talk to my buyers' lenders, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're
how are
supposed
you
to be
servicing
working
your
together
buyer?
as a team. Exactly. I mean, I have some of them that literally will not talk to the lender. They get a pre-approval letter and they just roll straight ahead. And I'm like, how are you doing? Why? Okay. Because what I found
And
is
they wonder
unless
why they're
somebody is a seasoned investor. Oh yeah, I was just going to say, unless somebody has been through this process multiple times, and even then they still don't always understand it. I mean, most of my buyers, that's what they depend upon me on, is to at a minimum send them back with questions and know that this scenario, whatever the scenario is, actually has questions attached to it.
Yeah. Well, and that's, my whole thing is making getting a mortgage not suck. We can extend that to making buying a house not suck. One of the ways to guarantee it's going to suck is having all of your people on different wavelengths, not talking to each other. That's supposed to be helping you advise. Like, imagine a football team, for example, if you had the offensive and defensive coordinator not on the same page. You got your offense going on 4th and 20 on their own 20-yard line. The defense is going to be a little irritated by that, that they're going to have good
Yeah,
odds of
exactly.
not winding up in a touchdown situation here. So, that you do need to make sure whenever you're picking out your team to work with that they work together. This is also another vote for why you want to use somebody local to market all the way around the horn here. Because if you've got, Bob in Timbuktu that's a lender for a company, and then you look up his, you just spoiler alert, everybody, if you want, we've all got this number. It's got an NMLS number attached to us. More often than not, you can look that up online and you see that Bob was a fry chef at Buffalo Wild Wings 2 weeks ago, and now he's helping you with the biggest purchase of your life. Is that what you want? Probably not. Um, Go look mine up if you want to. Who cares? I've been doing this for long enough to have all of those, so whatever. Um, anyway, you know, that's what's going to cause you some serious trouble through the process outside of just worrying about seller credits. The entire process could get blown up on account of that. I've seen it happen. And then on the flip side, I've seen cells that should have been rocky be a lot smoother. We've had some that were a lot smoother just because, we're operating on the same team here, communicating about what's going on the entire time. And that leads me to another thing, and that's like one of the inspections. A lot of the times that you'll get will be a pest inspection or termite inspection, right? On my end as the lender, here's what I'll tell you. For VA loans, that's the only loan that requires it. If your lender's telling you otherwise, either the appraisal showed something really ugly, or they've got what's called an overlay, and they're being a little extra. That's the best way to say it. They're making up extra guidelines because they feel like they need them. That being said, if you get a termite letter and it says there's active termites, it's not always the end of the world. It may just be that board or something, and they can probably kill them off with some heavy enough chemicals, and you're good to go. Maybe that the entire house is now built out of balsa wood and termite poo, and it's going to cave in tomorrow. Kind of figure that out. But if you get a termite letter and you're getting it treated and you're continuing with the process, don't send your lender the failed termite letter, because all that we're able to do with that is look at it and be like, neat, you have termites. You think I'm going to send that to an underwriter so that they can tell me we got termites? Absolutely not. I don't want them to know that. I want them to see after you fix the termites, the letter, because now the letter's a clear letter, right? So, I mean, have you seen situations like that in the past where people are, I guess, giving TMI to their lender and it causing problems whenever they don't know what's up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because there's, like he said, I mean, we've kind of talked about this in other podcasts, so you can go watch those too. But there is a process to this whole thing, and there is a process with lending. And the underwriter is the people on Matt's side that are looking at all the documents, looking at the files, checking the numbers, doing the final, I guess, approval. Is that the right thing to say? That basically says this loan can close. And so anytime you raise red flags with that underwriter, you're just creating problems that we probably could have avoided by me talking to Matt and or sending you back with questions to ask Matt, to make sure that we're not unnecessarily freaking out the underwriter, and then they start asking for more documentation, and then all of a sudden your loan's not closing, for things that are legitimately getting taken care of. We're not trying to hide stuff that they legitimately need to know, and perhaps your deal should not be closing, or you should not be buying this house. But at the same time, there's ways to deal with these things ahead of time and make sure that they don't create an issue. So yes, I had one that closed, that, they had to have termite things. We had to negotiate and take care of certain things. And the lender never knew anything about it, because the lender didn't need to know anything about it because it was getting taken care of. So, again, strategic, smart, make sure you're doing it the right way, but there's often multiple ways to do it. So, and then you mentioned lender overlays. So, let me do one more thing on inspections. So also, if I'm a listing agent and somebody sends over, on the buyer side, things that they want fixed at the house and the deal falls apart, technically, depending on what those things are, because there is a property condition disclosure that gets filled out for an owner occupied home. Sometimes sellers take the stance of, I refuse to fix it. I'm not going to fix anything. And the issue with that is technically, again, depending on what it is, they're potentially supposed to tell future prospective buyers that is something that is wrong with their home. So eventually, they're probably going to have to fix it anyway, or give somebody a credit, or it's going to, depending on if it's a foundation issue or something more substantive, which I've had deals fall out over foundation issues multiple times. Um, they might not even be able to get another buyer. So if you have a buyer who's willing to negotiate, sometimes the best thing to do is negotiate with that buyer, depending on what the issues are, as opposed to thinking you can put it back on the market and hope that somebody else doesn't do a home inspection and find it. Technically, you should have told them, so there's liability issues surrounding that type of information. On the flip side, I will say, just like everything, all home inspectors are not the same. There are some really great ones out there. There's some good ones out there. There's some mediocre ones out there, and there are some bad ones out there. So the problem also is, depending upon how good the home inspector is, I have truly had issues where a home inspector said something was an issue. My sellers bring out an expert or a different home inspector, and that was never an issue to begin with. Like, it totally was not correct. Nothing about it was right because the home inspector was not a good home inspector. So again, depending on the severity of the issue, the cost of getting it fixed, if it's going to deter other buyers, then sometimes the sellers actually want to bring their own inspector or their own experts out there to make sure that the issue is really an issue. Because the last thing you want to do is be told, I have a foundation issue, just believe it. Either negotiate when you didn't negotiate, or take it off the market and start telling prospective buyers you now have a foundation issue when you don't. So again, those are all things that an agent really has to understand without giving you too much advice and getting too much in the weeds, because I'm not a roof expert. I'm not a foundation expert. We have all kinds of disclaimers to tell you all the things that I'm not an expert in, but I need to know it enough to be smart enough to give you enough advice to send you back with the right questions, and to understand, if you're a buyer and you're starting over, that means we have to start over. You just lost your inspection money. If you had a termite inspection, you lost that money. I always tell people, as a buyer, you better have enough money to pay for 2 or 3 home inspections, because you don't get that money back. So I had one client that Matt and I closed this year, 3 houses, because the first 2 had fairly serious inspection issues and the sellers would not fix them. And so they had no choice but to move on to another house. So by the time they were done, they paid for 3 home inspections and 3 radon inspections. So it wasn't fun, but it was the right decision for them. So just remember, all this stuff costs money too. So just because you might not have to bring a down payment to closing, you still have to have some money to pay for a few things if you're going to walk through the process the right way.
Yeah, 100%. And those clients, I'm sure, saved copious amounts of money on the other end of things because they did have the inspections done and got to avoid potential nightmare scenarios. I mentioned my house earlier. It had a foundational issue. Here's the thing. Like I said, it was 75 years old, hadn't fallen apart yet, probably wasn't going to tomorrow. But when I bought it in the time in the market where you basically had to just go and buy the one house that was on the market. I did it in 2020. When I sold it, I realized that I wasn't in that market anymore. And as a seller, I needed to be reasonable if they said, hey, there's a problem here, Um, was I excited about it? No. My wife, who's also a real estate agent, was obviously our real estate agent. It'd be weird if she wasn't. But she's over here talking me off the ledge. I had to have my little moment to pout for a minute and talk about how irritated I was and how stupid I thought the inspection was. And then I was like, but you know what? In this situation, I have a conventional buyer with 20% down that I know if I had to go government with this and had a first time home buyer, it's a sketchier loan. And she's only asking us for these things. So I'm going to have to fix them anyway, and then probably add a handrail to steps that don't need it if I come back and get a FHA offer next. And that's assuming it's the same purchase price on their offer. So it's never just as simple as I'm going to buy a house. That house is going to cost $300,000, and my interest rate's a 5.5. Like, there are so many variables along the way that you've got to look at that are part of the process that are going to save or cost you lots of money. And sometimes in a weird way like that, it costs you money, but it saves you a lot of money on the back end. So, that's where I come in on the numbers part a lot of the times is showing people like, here's as many different things as I can think of that are going to be variables that are going to change how big of a financial move this is for you. And if it's overwhelming for some, then I try to tone it back for them a little bit. But in most cases, that helps people make a better, financial decision going forward than just focusing on, I got the lowest possible interest rate or I got the lowest possible purchase price. I mean, one of the big things I always tell people, I've personally experienced this. Like I'm just now at a stage in life where I bought a house that I don't have to work on constantly. Um, I was telling you can either make your payment to the mortgage company or you can make it to Home Depot. You get to decide, but you know, if you don't buy exactly what you're looking for or can't afford it, you're going to have to afford to make it what you're looking for, right? You're going to have to go to Home Depot 17 times because you forgot one piece over and over and keep buying the wrong one. Maybe that's just me, but at least Home Depot's close. Um, but there ain't a project that I start that doesn't wind up with several trips to Home Depot, right? That's part of your payments now. Um, so keep that in mind as you're analyzing properties too. Like if you can technically qualify for a home that's a couple $100s a month more, and you know that that home is something that you're not going to have to go spend a few $1,000s on in paint and upgrades to make it what you really want to live in, I would consider it. I would absolutely consider it.
No, that's a good point because people focus so much on that. They think that if I've got 200 extra dollars a month in a payment to buy a nicer house, I mean, when you break it down, that's $2,400 a year, which it all matters. But as you're saying, if you buy a fixer upper to try to save that $200 a month and it costs you $20,000 to fix that house up, yes, you probably increase the value of it, obviously, because it's no longer a fixer upper. But a lot of times when you break down the math on all that and you look at the time that it took you, that you maybe could have been working or making money or doing something else, everything costs more than you think it's going to cost. If you start tearing into walls, there's probably stuff hiding back there that nobody could possibly have known about. It always takes longer. You're living in disarray. You've got all your stuff piled in two rooms that you can't walk into because you've got part of your furniture because you're over here trying to redo your living room, and now instead of it taking 1 month, it takes 4 months. I mean, there's just a lot of issues that when you start adding up just the money, you may still be better off paying $200 a month. But if you also start adding up the aggravation and the frustration and the extra time that it's going to take and all those other things, $200 a month, we're just using that as an example, but maybe doesn't seem like too much after all. Because it could be, 5 to 7 years of 200 extra dollars a month equals all this other stuff that you were going to have to do to the home. And then, of course, as we've talked about in other episodes, roof and HVACs and over time, more and more stuff starts breaking down. So, you have to look at the overall picture and not just get so hyper focused on wanting one thing, because that one thing that you want, it's important, obviously, but it may not be the best decision after all.
Yeah. Well, and even with that house that I bought, it was, like I said, it was a flip house. They had renovated it, put a lot of lipstick on it, made it a lot prettier than it started. Of course, we lived in it. That it had wear and tear just from the fact that we've got boys that are essentially cavemen living with us that are my sons and a dog. But one of the big things that really slapped me when I first moved in, that I didn't even think about. I you would think I would, but I didn't, was when they renovated this house, they didn't have any blinds up, and they also did not have any hooks or hangers or anything, not hangers, any shelves or anything in the closets. So the first thing I had to do before I could even hang my own clothes up was I had to go get closet organization stuff and build out my closet so I had something to hang my clothes up on. Um, Blinds, I'll be honest with you, I never even put blinds on the entire time I lived there. I just went blindless. We had some curtains up front. Should have had some in my bathroom in the master because it was not frosted, and I just went with it. And it overlooked my neighbor's driveway. And for 5 years, we waved at each other awkwardly sometimes while I was in the bathroom. But anyway, there you go. TMI. You got that one for free. That's the extra credit right there. Um, so yeah, I mean, you got to also be
Extra
thinking
things to
about those
think
sorts of
about.
things.
What
Yeah.
Yeah. What direction are your windows facing and who can look in them?
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing like, standing there brushing your teeth or worse and seeing your neighbor looking at you across your driveway. It's wonderful. Um, so anyway, we'll keep it completely G-rated on the mental imagery of what all was going on there. But as far
That's
as as
right.
far as it goes, like you, there's so many aspects of it that people think, am I making the right decision? When it comes down to it, there is no right decision. There's like how right is the decision, and it's a gradient, and you'll never know whether it was the best decision or not. I mean, it's the decision you decided to make at that point in time, and if it's your job to make the most out of it, because there's always opportunity cost. There's always a chance that the house down the street would have worked out better, and its pipe wouldn't burst 6 months in. There's also a chance that it would have been
Oh,
worse for different reasons.
yeah. My second door neighbors actually had that happen. They moved in and most of the house had been renovated. They did a few things that they wanted to do, and it looked really nice. It was built in like the late 1950s, so it's actually really well built, I would say, because they built things really good back then. The wood was better. There's all kinds of things, but yeah, I mean, they ended up having pipe issues that they didn't know, and then they ended up having to come up with the money to renovate their entire kitchen. They had to move out and go live down the street in an Airbnb part of the time. I mean, you just can't know as much as you want to know, but that shouldn't make you afraid. You shouldn't be fearful. I mean, we're here to give you the confidence to walk through the process, to share what wisdom and knowledge we do have in the moment. And, you just have to, like with everything in life, just like when you buy a car, even if it's a brand new car, by the time you drive it off the lot, there could be significant things wrong with it. So you still buy a car, so therefore you should still buy a house. So anyway, all right. Well, that took way longer than we thought it would. So we really kind of covered pros and cons of how to handle home inspections, good ones, bad ones, what to think about both as a buyer or seller, what negotiations look like, and how all of that influences potential contract negotiations and any potential issues when it comes to changing the terms of your original contract, and how that can help make sure that you're making the right decisions, if you're particularly trying to get more closing costs later on in the equation.
Absolutely. Obviously, this episode wasn't here to scare the crap out of you. It's here to inform you. So take this information, use it on your own
Right.
home search, like, you know, become this information. We look forward to seeing you here in 2 weeks.
All right. I'm Ann Riley Caldwell, not your ordinary agent, and I'm here again with Matt Wilson. Also, I'm going to call him not your ordinary lender, even though he's probably never been called that before, but it is true in a good way. But we're always here helping you make smart and strategic choices in your life when it comes to home buying and financing. And again, sometimes we give you life advice like we did today. Be careful about where your windows face and who can see in and what you're doing. So anyway, if you missed it, rewind and watch that part again, because that could be the best thing that we told you today. All right. Again, we always enjoy being with you, and we'll see you next time.